Today we are doing a range test between the Polestar 4 long range dual motor performance and the new MG IM5 all-wheel drive performance. So we're going to find out which of these two cars has the most range, going 120 kilometers an hour or 75 miles an hour on the motorway. And then I'm also going to give you guys my first driving impressions of these two cars, but later on there will be a full comparison video between these two cars, so we're not going to talk about all the details in today's video. Today is all about getting the most range out of these two performance electric saloons. Before we set off, I want to ask you guys one small favor, which is completely free and only takes you 2 seconds, but means the world to me and really means you want to support this channel to become one of the best when it comes to EV testing, and that is subscribing. More than 80% of you watching on a consistent basis aren't subscribed. We're really trying to get to 75,000 subscribers this year, and with your help, I'm pretty sure we could make it. So support me, support the channel, hit that subscribe button, and now on with this test. As per usual, we'll be doing this range test on my normal route from Dal to Moelv and back. In total, 194 kilometers in an ABA procedure, meaning that wind direction and changes in elevation should be eliminated. I'll be driving the lead car, with the follow car being driven with its cruise control set to the furthest distance. Halfway, we'll change cars so both cars have equal time in clean air. Activating auto steer, or pilot as MG call it, isn't always reliable in this car, and also once it's activated it tends to disengage with no apparent reason, and then trying to activate it again is not always reliable. And also when it comes to passing cars like this Ampera, and there it just disengaged. You saw that in the turn, moving close to that Opel Ampera, it disengaged. Yeah, not very good. The auto steer functionality, the pilot functionality, when it comes to the ADAS in this car, not reliable, a little bit scary, and while turning, it disengaged, moving closer to that Opel. Not good. So not confidence inspiring. Also, when it comes to on and off ramps, it's a little bit insecure, where it tries to follow the line. Like, that's been a problem with many cars when it comes to ADAS for many years, but it's 2026 now. Most good ADAS systems have resolved those issues. Like, we're well into, I don't know, the better part of a decade from the oldest auto steer functionality systems from Tesla, from Volvo and other brands. It shouldn't be this unreliable and this sketchy to use. But okay, you may be thinking, Chris, why are you testing these two cars against each other? This is obviously a fastback saloon, while the Polestar 4 is a coupe SUV. Well, a coupe SUV according to Polestar, according to their marketing, but if you've seen any of my Polestar 4 videos, which I've made quite a few of, I don't think that marketing is necessarily accurate. I don't agree with how they label that car, because when you look at the car, the way it looks, when you look at the stats and specs, it's pretty much a fastback saloon just without a rear window. So I think this is a very fair comparison, and especially when you consider the last, comparison video we did between the Polestar 4 and the Volvo ES90. The Polestar 4 has lower ground clearance and is also a lower car. The Polestar 4 is 6 centimeters taller than this, but for being a modern saloon, this is quite low. And when you look at the IM6, which is the SUV version of this is about 20 centimeters shorter or lower than that IM6, and the Polestar is like 13 or 14 centimeters lower than that. So by any measurement, the Polestar 4 is a saloon and this is a saloon. And also, there aren't that many performance fastbacks, performance electric saloons on sale in Europe or in Norway. And when you compare these two cars on paper, they are close. Like, range isn't that far off, the dimensions, the size isn't that far off, and also the pricing isn't that far off if you don't go crazy with the Polestar. This car in Norway is 570,000 kroners, while the Polestar spec the way it is 736,000. So about 15,000 euros in difference, or about 10, 11,000 pounds, which isn't that bad. And considering that the Polestar has, adaptive dampers, the Polestar is a lot more roomy, I don't think it is too unfair comparing these two cars. But where this car really has the edge over the Polestar is in performance. Like, this has 200 horsepower more and a much higher top speed, and also a much lower seating position. I really like driving in this car. Like, it's more noisy than the Polestar, but you do have, a low sporty driving position. And despite, the auto steer functionality not being reliable, it's quite a comfortable car. Like, the seats are comfortable, the ride is very soft and plush. And when it comes to like the steering input, the throttle calibration, this is much closer to a European car than it is to any Chinese cars I've ever driven. But okay, enough about that. Let's call up Philip in the Polestar and see what the efficiency is like in this compared to that. Hi Philip, how's it going in the Polestar?
It's very nice, going very good. I love it, yeah.
You want to give us an update, first your battery percentage?
Yes, the battery percentage is at 65% now.
Okay, so I have to find this screen. It's not easy. I found it before. Where is the vehicle? There, my car. You're at 64?
65%.
Okay, I'm also at 65%. That is interesting, and we both started with 79. You want to give us your consumption?
Consumption is now 27.6.
I'm at 27.5. That is very close.
Yeah, that's really close.
And both are very thirsty, because that is quite high consumption. I mean, it's not the warmest day. Currently 12 degrees Celsius here, according to the MG. We have dry conditions, but we are driving towards a headwind of 3 to 4 meters per second. So I think that's going to affect our consumption. What does the Polestar say the outside temperature is now, Philip?
14 degrees now.
Okay, so it's a little bit higher than this. I think this is a lot more. Yeah, so it's a little bit higher than what this car shows. I think this is a lot more reliable, because the Polestar was pretty off earlier. It's showing like 17 when it was like 10, right? So it's pretty inaccurate. Okay, so thank you for the update. Have fun in the Polestar, and I'll see you once we get to a halfway point when we switch up cars.
Perfect. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The first thing you notice hopping into the Polestar from the IM5 is that this feels a lot bigger on the inside. The car feels a lot wider from behind the wheel, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It feeling bigger may also have to do with this having the optional Sync Napa leather, which is beautiful. These seats are firm yet comfortable, so they're supportive yet soft. They are really nice, and you have a lot of adjustment. It's just a nice place to sit. And the same goes for the ride. This has the optional adaptive dampers, which are standard in the performance pack, which means that the ride is very controlled. This feels lighter than the IM5. You don't feel as much the imperfections in the road. It just irons out those a lot better, but at the same time, it controls its mass a lot better. And also, despite this being on larger 22-inch wheels, the IM5 is on 20-inch wheels, so a lot bigger wheels and tires with this car. It's a tad bit quieter. So both cars are on summer tires, and the road here is quite coarse. I mean, Norwegian asphalt in general is a lot more coarse than what you find on the continent. So if you drove this car in Denmark or in Germany or in Italy, you wouldn't have nearly as much road noise as you have here in Europe. And also, this just feels so solid behind the wheel. There's just a sense of solidity that you don't find in that IM5. This just feels like a much more premium and polished product. And talking about polish, the adaptive cruise control, the ADAS, the auto steer, and this car just works flawless. It is so well calibrated, engages so smoothly, and just follows dead center in the lane. There's no hesitation when it comes to traffic, passing, or when you're passing traffic or on or off ramps or trucks. It is much improved from the first iteration I drove back in the fall of 2024. And from a driving perspective, this is now become one of the best driving electric cars on the market. Also, physical buttons has been introduced for the model year 2026, making this car almost perfect. It is so darn good to drive and experience from behind the steering wheel. But this does have a smaller battery pack and also on paper a lower WLTP rated range. But let's call up Philip to see if this has less range in this test, if the consumption is lower in this or in the IM5.
Hello, all.
Hello, Philip. How's it going in the IM5?
It's going very good. I'm just following your path.
You want to give us an update on your battery percentage?
My battery percentage is 49% at the moment.
I'm also at 49%. This is very close and much closer than expected.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
You want to tell us your consumption?
Consumption is 26.3 at the moment.
I'm at 26.6. Okay, so you're lower than me. That is interesting.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like this is going to be a dead heat all the way back towards the goal line. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Okay, thanks for the update, Philip, and have a nice trip, and I'll talk to you in a bit, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We are now back here at the chargers, and we're going to connect both of these two cars to each of their charger, of course, and see what charge speed we get now after driving on the road for a few hours, but without preconditioning the battery. And the reason we don't do that is to see what charge speed we get if you don't, heat up the battery. And also, because we're not heating up the battery, we are not expendituring any extra energy, and we're getting the lowest consumption, the highest efficiency, thus the most range out of these cars. So we arrived here with 26% with the Polestar, and this is on a 400 volt architecture and has a peak charge speed of 200 kilowatts, and at 25% we should get 200 kilowatts if the battery is up to temperature. But that is what we're going to find out today. What percentage of that maximum peak of 200 kilowatts will we get without preconditioning the battery? And it is climbing quite rapidly. Today's temperature outside has been between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. So a little bit colder conditions, and you can see that we're not getting, that peak charge speed. We're getting 166 kilowatts, which is pretty close to 75% of the peak charge speed. But I know from earlier today, before we set off, I did precondition the battery, and this car easily hit 200 kilowatts at that percent of battery. Now let's check out what charge speed we get from the MG IM5. So this is on an 800 volt architecture and has a peak charge speed of 396 kilowatts. But that is when you are at a state to charge of 5% or lower. And we're now here with 26% state to charge. So 1% more than with the Polestar. But we're going to do the calculations at the end of the video, battery pack size based on the consumption, because that discharge rate and the BMS calibration isn't always linear, so you can't actually trust that. But this being an 800 volt architecture car, normally these are more sensitive to battery heat than the 400 volt cars, meaning that this normally under today's conditions where the ambient temperature is quite low and the battery maybe needs like a internal temperature around 30 degrees Celsius, it's going to get a lower percentage of its peak charge speed, and also it's taking a little bit time to initiate. And the reason I'm holding the cable here is because we already did try to charge, but the charging failed. And let's see, it is climbing slowly, but this says 25%. That's interesting. So again, as the BMS calibration seems to be quite off, because this says 25 while the car just said 26. So I don't know which one we're going to trust. And also you can see that it's taking a little bit of time to climb, very, very slowly. But let's see if we can match that Polestar charge speed, or hopefully beat it. But it's going very, very slowly. 80, 81? Is that it? Come closer, Philip. This thing isn't going higher. And that just confirms what I said. From experience, these 800 volt architecture cars does really need you to utilize that battery preconditioning, which means, yes, we were able to maybe arrive here with more battery or the same, depending on what we can trust. But that means if you were going to stop and to charge, you would have had to heat up the battery more to get it up to temperature to get that peak charge speed of 300 kilowatts plus. But yeah, we've been connected for 2 minutes now. We're only getting 83 kilowatts, which is very, very disappointing. Now let's take a look at the consumption numbers and calculate range. So the Polestar 4 long range dual motor with 22-inch wheels had an average consumption of 26.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and the MG IM5 all-wheel drive performance an average consumption of 25.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, so a little bit lower. And this has a usable battery capacity of 96.5 kilowatt hours, and this 94.0 kilowatt hours. And when we take the average consumption numbers divided by the battery pack sizes and subtract 3% for heat loss and discharging losses, this gets a range of 338 kilometers, and this 359 kilometers. And to be honest, none of these numbers are great. I think the consumption numbers for this is pretty high, and also this. This is quite expected because this is a very wide car, which is a little bit taller, and I was not expecting this to be almost as efficient, especially considering it has much smaller wheels. So either way, I'm actually disappointed by the consumption numbers of both these cars. I think 359, okay, that's not too bad going 120 kilometers an hour, but that is thanks to that big 96.5 kilowatt hours of usable capacity. And this also, those numbers aren't great. I mean, 27 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers is pretty darn high, even though it's not that warm, it's not cold either. I mean, these are spring temperatures. So let me know in the comment section down below, guys, what do you think of the range and consumption numbers of both these two cars? To be honest, I'm quite disappointed, and I think they are way, way too high for these type of vehicles, especially considering the numbers we've gotten with other newer and modern electric cars. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below, and for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later, and goodbye.